67% of millennials consider this their number one fear, the financial overextension. We have one of the highest state income taxes in the country. You have a stable income, you found the right neighborhood, and you want to put down roots. So when you're moving to Portland and you're looking at the neighborhoods, don't just look at the house. All right, so mistake number one. This is the one that I see most often, and it costs buyers tens of thousands of dollars. Most people start their Portland home search by getting on YouTube and searching living in Portland and starting with general videos, and then hopping over to Zillow and doing generalized searches to look for homes. They search Portland, Oregon in the search bar, and then they put in the square feet that they're looking for. And here's the problem with that approach. While many online sources are going to quote the median home price in Portland at about $550K, that assumes that Portland is a monolith. There are so many pockets to Portland, so many micro neighborhoods, and so that only tells you a tiny fraction of the story. And the price differences across the greater Portland metro area, including all the surrounding suburbs, Beaverton, West Linn, Lake Oswego, right? The price differences are massive. They're 2x, 3x in some areas. And so if you don't have even that level of granularity, you're off on the wrong foot. So let's start with some real numbers. Like if you look right outside the city in a family-friendly suburb like, say, Gresham, the median home price out there is going to be about $475K. So compared to Portland proper, we're talking about a $75K median home price difference right off the bat. And on the flip side, if you're looking at Lake Oswego, well-regarded suburb in this area for, really good schools, forested suburban feel, bigger homes, bigger yards, your median price point is going to be closer to probably, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but like $950K, $1 million, a little bit north of $1 million. Right there is literally double Portland's median home price. And it's not just about price, right? The lifestyle differences of Portland versus Gresham versus Lake Oswego, they're pretty dramatic. So West Linn, which is nearby to Lake Oswego, it is family focused, it's affluent, house prices are probably $775 for the median home price out there. Tigard is like your well-balanced middle ground suburb. It's got a mix of home styles in it. It's got a cute little downtown in it, and it's mid-range on the price point. It's about $525K median home price out there. And then if you're moving out to Beaverton and you need to be close to, say, Nike or Intel, because that's where you work, Beaverton home prices are going to be in the neighborhood of about $540K median price. More diversity of home styles out there, and it's a super family-focused area. So we've got a range, right? We're just talking about the suburbs now, and we've got a $200,000 range on the median home price, closer to $500,000 if you include Lake Oswego. So we're talking about completely different financial landscapes out there, and we're also talking about different feels, right? Tigard does feel pretty different than, say, Lake Oswego or Beaverton or West Linn or Gresham. And if you're moving with kids, right? Because I work with a lot of families who move with kids. I have a couple of small kids myself. These differences are even more important. So when you look at various school ranking sites, great schools, niche, whatever it is you look at, Reddit, talking to people, right? Consider it a variety of sources. This is my feedback as your realtor. But think about those things. But like places like Lake Oswego, Riverdale, West Linn, Beaverton, they're highly regarded for their schools. So what the data really looks at is, if school quality and academic quality is a high priority in your process of relocating here, you can't just search Portland, Oregon on a map and say, oh, like the median home price is $550K, right? Because there's typically a correlation between the school quality and the price point that you're going to be looking at. And you've got to be able to dig in of what price points are available to you and what kind of school experience are you looking for. Some schools are going to be heavy on athletics. Some are going to be heavily focused on STEM. Some schools have wonderful Vietnamese immersion programs, right? And so you need to be clear on both your budget and your kids' school's needs and requirements so that you can narrow those both down into your criteria for searching. The good news about all of this specificity in the home search process is that a lot of the Portland suburbs don't get the same attention as a lot of the really famous Portland neighborhoods like Laurelhurst, like Alameda, places like that. So because they don't get as much coverage from YouTube, from blogs, etc., they're not your famous Portland places, that means there's typically less competition in them, especially from other folks relocating out of state. So by being able to dig deeper at the specific suburb level, you're going to be finding potential housing opportunities that other people are missing, and you might be able to get a slightly better deal that way. Mistake number 2 is all about the hidden costs that crush buyers after they move in. And this one is critical because it directly addresses that fear of being financially overextended after you buy a house, buying too much house and not having enough money for the furniture to move into it. And this is a big fear for a lot of people. I read a stat that like 67% of millennials consider this their number one fear, the financial overextension. So here's what most people do. They look at their mortgage statement and think, okay, I can afford that. That sounds good. But the mortgage is really, it's just the beginning. So stay with me here. I know it's taxes. I know yawn, right? But the Oregon tax landscape, there's something about it that catches most people off guard. So on the good side, Oregon doesn't have any sales tax. That's huge. We're one of only 5 states in the entire country without sales tax. So when you're buying groceries, clothes, electronics, furniture, you don't have that 7 to 10% on top like most of the other states out there, right? And that adds up. Like when you're buying something big and expensive here, you can feel that difference. But the reality check of living here is that we have one of the highest state income taxes in the country. So depending on your income, anywhere from 4.7 to 9.9% is going to be coming out and going to the state. And if you're in one of the higher income tax brackets, you're going to feel that. You know, that's 10% of your paycheck. And then to further add on to this, we have high property taxes. It's about 1.07% annually, but it can vary pretty significantly county to county. Okay, so let's break this down with some real numbers. Say that you buy a $549,000 home. So again, in Portland, that's gonna be your median price point. Your annual property tax is gonna look different depending on what county you're in. So if you're in Multnomah County, which is where Portland is located, your tax bill is gonna be about $6,200 per year, which comes out to about $515 per month. If you're out in Clackamas County, the tax bill is a little bit lower. It's about $5,800, $5,900 per year. And then if you're in Washington County, it's really the cheapest of the core counties from a property tax perspective, and your bill is going to be closer to the tune of about $5,600 per year. So this is a really good example of a hidden cost that your online mortgage calculator, if you're not careful, it may not be adding that in there. So according to Mr. Calculator, you are budgeting for a $2,500 mortgage when in actuality, when everything comes due, it's closer to $3,000 a month. So it's about a $500 gap. And then there's all the other hidden costs that you may or may not be thinking about. So you might have HOA fees, especially if you live in a more suburban area. Those can be expensive. Some places, those can be, $200, $500 a month. So absolutely not an insignificant cost. If you live out in the suburbs, your transportation costs are probably going to be a little bit higher because A, you're going to need a car, and B, you're going to have to drive it more. So you're going to pay more in gas. And then one more factor on the finances is if you're carrying around any debt, particularly for millennials, right? Like student loan debt is still very much a factor in our daily finances. That can greatly reduce your purchasing power. So this is something that you can think about as you're getting pre-approved and as you're thinking about, making your relocation move. You can think about what can I chip away from a debt perspective to improve my debt to income ratio in the underwriting process, and then get an approval for, more home or better rates or whatever it might be. So the bottom line here is that you need to think of your total cost change when you're moving to Oregon. So not just how much is the house going to cost me, but also how is my income tax going to shift my monthly spending? How is the property tax gonna look? Am I subject to an HOA? Am I subject to, do I now need a car, right? And so these are things you need to think of from a larger financial picture perspective when you're making a move to Oregon. And only when you think about that full picture are you gonna be able to actually understand what you can afford here. Okay, mistake number 3. This is one that keeps people on the sidelines for way longer than they need to be. This is that mistake. And this one is all about waiting for the perfect market conditions, as if something like that exists. Same concept in the world of buying a house, selling a house, trying to wait for the perfect moment when the interest rates come down, when the market is more in favor of sellers, when it's a buyer's market, you name it, people try to game the system. I talk to buyers and sellers every single day who say, oh, I'm just gonna wait for the mortgage rate to drop under 5.5%. Or I think the market's gonna crash in 6 months when this political event occurs. I'm just waiting for that. And when you look at the data, that's what the data says. It's like 86% of millennials say that they would absolutely consider buying if the interest rates dropped. So the psychology, it makes sense. It's totally understandable. It's totally normal. It's totally human. But this strategy, just like in investments, when you pull out when it's low to try to preserve your losses and then you miss the run up on the other side, this strategy will cost you a lot of money long term. So let's do the math. You're buying a $500,000 home at a 6% interest rate. That monthly payment is, give or take, $3,000. But you decide to wait for a year so the rates can drop to 5%, which on its head sounds smart, right? But here's what's actually happening in the market. During that same year that you're waiting, home prices are appreciating. So say they go up 2-3%. So that $500,000 house worth $515,000. So with your new 5% rate and your newly home priced to $515K, your monthly payment is, roughly around $2,700. So you've saved $200-300 by your waiting, which on the surface, yay, you've saved money. That was a smart decision. But what you're not factoring in is that you just also paid rent for the previous year. So if your rent was, $2,000 a month, that means you paid $24,000 last year in that same year that you were waiting in rent, and 0% of that money built any equity. Meanwhile, if you had just purchased a year ago at 6%, you would have had about $10,000 in equity through appreciation alone over that time period. So the actual cost of waiting here was that $24,000 in rent paid minus the $234 or $250 or $300, whatever it is, per month that you saved in the difference of the mortgage at 5% and the mortgage at 6%. So in order to break even on that gap, it'll take about 9 years. So what feels like a short-term smart financial decision, if you zoom out and you take in all the actual costs around it, like paying rent, the lack of equity that you're accruing, things like that, it's actually not such a good idea. And the real kicker here is that you can refinance your mortgage, right? That 6% mortgage, you can refinance it a year later when those rates drop. But you can't change the purchase price. Once the home values go up, you are going to have to pay a higher price for the same house you could have had a year ago. If you don't know this, there are lenders out there that have things like programs where you can refinance and they will do it at cost for a certain period of time, say the first 5 years on the loan. And so it becomes an opportunity to mitigate any sort of risk that you might feel or expenses that you might incur from a refinancing. So let's talk real quick about what's happening in the market right now. A lot of buyers out there right now, a lot of sellers, they're just sitting on the sidelines waiting for the interest rates to get better so that they can jump in. And that feels all good and dandy, but there's a lot of people with that same exact idea in their minds. So again, when those rates come down, yes, you're gonna be able to get a lower rate, but you're also going to be competing with 10 times the number of people who are out there right now, because all those people that had that same idea, they're going to jump in at the same time as you. And the other factors that are Portland specific to consider is that we just got named by United Van Lines. We got named to the #1 spot in their relocation data this year, right? So people are coming here, it's getting more popular, and that puts increased pressure on, the housing supply and the buying process. And you've also got cash rich boomers who are looking to move into this space. Maybe they're looking to downgrade from their big, large home into a smaller home, and then they're competing with first-time home buyers in that same space. When you're thinking about this, the right time to buy is not waiting for some arbitrary moment when, I will buy when the interest rates hit X. The right time to buy is when your life circumstances align. You have a stable income, you found the right neighborhood, and you want to put down roots. That's your criteria. Mistake number 4, time to talk process and procedure. In Oregon, as a buyer, you're going to be required to sign a buyer representation agreement with a real estate agent, a realtor, before you're allowed to look at any homes. Now, you can go to an open house by yourself, that's no problem, but if you want a realtor to open a door for you in a private showing, you've got to get this document signed. Now, this might sound restrictive. You don't want to commit to somebody. You got to kind of test the waters first. I get it. As a consumer, I get it. It can feel scary. The goal here with this restriction is actually transparency and protection for both the agent and the consumer. And by getting this all out of the way, it means that your agent has a fiduciary responsibility to you. They have to put your financial interests first before their own commission. And so here's where you can get tripped up with this one. You are all excited about your move to Portland. You buy your plane tickets, you book your Airbnb, you're on the flight, you touch ground, you've got an open house lined up, and then you want to go see other houses. But you don't have an agent yet, and you haven't signed a buyer representation agreement. That means you're not going to be able to see any houses. So step 1 here is before you come house hunting in Portland, find an agent and get it signed. Second big difference here is the inspection period. Oregon's standard inspection period is just 10 days long and it's negotiable. So in competitive offers, people might shorten their inspection period or even completely waive it in order to make their offer more competitive against a multi-bid situation. This means you're going to want to have an inspector lined up, ready to go. You want to know who you're going to call before your offer gets accepted, so you're not calling around, scrambling, trying to find somebody last minute when you don't have any time to sort of vet them out or check out their reviews or do your due diligence. Again, having an agent in place through the buyer representation agreement, your agent will have ideas for you about who to talk to and suggestions. But again, you're going to want to do your research to find someone that you're comfortable with prior to putting in an offer, so it's just easy on the other side. Other things to be prepared for here is that the typical closing period on an Oregon home is 30 to 45 days. So that means once you get your offer accepted, your lender is going to be asking for all sorts of updated financial paperwork, pay stubs, housing statements, tax returns, bank statements, things like that. So the more you have them kind of ready to go, the easier that process is going to be. Property disclosure laws in Oregon are also more stringent than a lot of states, which is a really good thing for buyers because sellers are required by law to disclose any known material defects. But it also means as a buyer, you're going to have more to review and more to think about. You're going to have, you'll be doing your inspection, hopefully better. Please do it. And then you're also going to be having the seller's property disclosures. And so you're going to have 2 pieces of information that you're going to need to consider in a pretty tight timeline to make a final decision of, does this meet our criteria? Is this suitable for us? The other thing to know about Oregon, especially if you're a first-time homebuyer, is that Oregon has a lot of first-time homebuyer programs that can help save you tens of thousands of dollars. So first up, there is the Oregon First-Time Homebuyers Savings Account, which is a state-sponsored program that allows you to save money for the down payment and closing costs in a dedicated tax-advantaged account. So this program is still available through the end of 2026. It allows individuals to save up to $5,000 per year, or if you're in a couple, it's about $10,000 towards those costs. So if this is you, look into this now, start working on this now. Secondly, Oregon offers some down payment assistant loans for certain qualified first-time homebuyers and first-generation homeowners. The loans can be up to 3.5% of a home's purchase price. So on a $500,000 home, that might be up to $17,500 in assistance. And then the city of Portland actually has a down payment assistance loan program as well. And so that can help you get more favorable terms if you're buying within the city of Portland. And then here's a big one, right? A lot of relocation buyers, think that they need a 20% down payment in order to get in. And so, $500,000 house, we're talking about a $100,000 down payment. But some Oregon lenders will offer conventional loans with as little as 3% down and FHA loans with 3.5% down. So that can get you into a home a lot quicker with a lot smaller down payment. And you need someone who knows the local market, knows the neighborhoods where that's going to get you a good home that works for you, knows local Oregon lenders who can talk to you about those programs and get you more in-depth details. If you're working with someone in, from out of state, from Texas, from California, etc., they may not have all that on the ground context. Okay, that's it. No more big money talk, big process talk, etc. But let's keep going. Mistake number 5 is a core value of the millennial experience and generation. It is, do we value experiences over possessions or possessions over experiences? And the answer is we value experiences. So how does this translate to buying a house? The shortcut answer here is that people buy for a bigger square foot house versus the experience of the neighborhood that they live in. And that creates a problem. So say somebody's coming from California or any other more expensive market, and they come here and they see how far their money gets them and they say, wow, I can get so much more house than what I'm used to. Then they start shopping purely based on how big the house is and the cost per square foot. And I will tell you one thing about the Portland market, it's not priced by the square foot. So some markets do that outside of Portland and Oregon. We do not. We do it. We do the calculation. Of course we can do the calculation, but that's not how houses are priced. It looks at a lot of other factors. So somebody moves here from the Bay Area, they're used to living in 1,200 square feet, and they see they can get a home for double that size for less money. So they do that. That's what they do. It sounds awesome. And then they move in, and then 6 months later, they say, it takes me 15 minutes to drive to my local coffee shop. And then 9 months later, they're like, I can't walk anywhere. I have to get in my car every time I want to go somewhere. And so all of that square footage, it does not matter because their day in lifestyle, it doesn't work for them. So let's talk about the data here. A lot of Portland is quite walkable. So the Pearl District, if you look at like walkability scores, which factors in, walkability to coffee shops, libraries, city attractions, things like that. Places like the Pearl has like a 97 walkability score. You can live your entire life in these walkable areas without ever needing a car. Downtown Portland, walk score of 96. Old Town, 95. Like super urban, everything's right there. You're living smack dab in the middle of everything. But you don't just have to live in a downtown environment in Portland to get walkability, which is where this place gets really interesting and really fun. So if you want walkability, but you don't want high-rise urban density feeling, Hollywood neighborhood, for example, has a walk score of 87. And on the main drag, Sandy and Hollywood, you have massive gyms, you've got really historic movie theater, you've got a variety of, you've got pizza, you've got Korean fried chicken, you've got barbecue, you've got a bunch of different restaurants, right? You've got a library, you've got schools, right? And so you have very good walkability scores, but you're not in downtown. So for the same price as what you would pay Suburb, Lake Oswego, or West Linn, or whatever it might be, for the same price for a larger house, you can move to one of these walkable neighborhoods, have a smaller house, and then be connected to breweries, coffee shops, your kids' school, the library, all that good stuff. And so if you are a millennial or you are leaning towards the millennial sort of feeling ethos of, experiences over possessions, thinking about this trade-off between size and walkability is going to be important for your search. And for a lot of folks, that increased neighborhood walkability, it's worth it, right? You're giving up, 300 square feet, 500 square feet in a home, and you're picking up access to all of these community features and just interesting stuff going on around you. Now let's talk about another part of the Portland experience that's really important when you're moving here, which is access to nature. One of the biggest reasons that people love Portland and always move here is access to the outdoors. You can go, you can get to the coast in 90 minutes. You can be on the mountains in an hour. You can be in a forest in 15 minutes, right? It's all right here. And Portland itself has over 17,000 acres of parks, of green spaces, of playgrounds. Forest Park alone, which is on the west side of the city, has over 5,200 acres of forest, right? It's one of the largest urban forests in the United States. It's got hiking trails. I take my kids hiking out there all the time. You can go mountain biking, you can go trail running, right? It's huge. So when you're moving to Portland and you're looking at the neighborhoods, don't just look at the house. Look at the house in the context of the community that it sits in, and look at the house in the context of its proximity to the outdoors. So on the west side, can you get to Forest Park in 10 minutes? Is there a neighborhood park where your kids can run down the street and go get on the swing set? That access to the parks and the trails and the green space, it's baked into the Portland experience, right? And you can't put a price tag on it, but it is something you definitely need to be thinking about when you're moving here. Also, you're gonna wanna think about your community vibe. So on the whole, Portland attracts people who value inclusivity, diversity, progressive values. So if that's you, make sure the neighborhood that you pick aligns with your values. If that's not you, also think about if where you're picking is aligned with your values. So bottom line, you're coming from somewhere else. Don't just try to replicate what you have somewhere else here in Portland. Think about what might actually make you happy here in Portland specifically, because what we have on offer here is different than a lot of places in the United States. And sometimes a smaller home in the right neighborhood will beat a bigger home in the wrong neighborhood with a commute every single time. So it's something to think about. All right, mistake number 6. This one determines if you get the house that you want, especially in a competitive situation. Let's start with some hard truths about what it means to be a millennial homebuyer in the United States. Only 13% of millennials have enough for a traditional 20% down payment. And 1 in 4 millennials, 25%, have more debt than they do savings. So if that's you, first of all, you're not alone. Second of all, your lender choice is critical. A lot of buyers will just go to an online mortgage provider like, Rocket Mortgage, something simple, simply because of the convenience. It's there and they apply. You fill out a form, you get the pre-approval email, and then you think, okay, I'm good to go. Let's do it. Let's buy a house. But the problem is that Portland, it's a competitive market, and listing agents know which lenders are reliable in terms of their ability to get a deal done when it counts. They know which lenders understand Oregon-specific programs, and they know which pre-approval letters hold weight and which pre-approval letters are basically worthless. So say you're trying to buy in Alameda, which is a super hot neighborhood. You've got a competitive situation. The houses go above list and they go quickly in that neighborhood, oftentimes in about 2 weeks. When you're in that situation and you have multiple offers on the line, the pre-approval letter can be a make or break factor for you. So a strong pre-approval letter here is gonna give the seller confidence that your offer is real and that it's not gonna fall through in the last minute. This can give you an edge over the competition. And the other reason that you need to know a knowledgeable local lender is because they know all the Oregon-specific programs. They're gonna know about FHA loans. They're gonna know about conventional loans where maybe you only have to put 3% down. They're gonna understand Oregon's down payment assistance programs. And they're gonna figure out how to work with your student debt so that it doesn't crush your buying power. Online lenders, they're gonna feel convenient. It's gonna feel easier than working with a local lender, but they just don't have that Oregon-specific level of knowledge. The other thing I'll say here is that we also need to clarify between pre-qualification and pre-approval, because those two things aren't the same. And it's super easy to get confused. Pre-qualification is basically a rough estimate based on what you tell the lender, and then the lender gives you some feedback that says basically based on what you tell us, I think you'll probably be able to afford just about this much. Pre-approval is where the lender is actually digging into your finances. So they're looking at your assets, they're looking at your liabilities, they're looking at your credit. They look at your tax statements, they run your credit reports, they review your bank statements, they look at your pay stubs, the whole 9 yards, they're in there. And then they issue a formal letter that says, we have reviewed the borrower's financial documents and we are prepared to lend them an amount up to X. weeks. So back to the Alameda buying situation. You're in a competitive buying situation. You're ready to go. The perfect house pops up and boom. All you've got is a pre-qualification letter. In that situation, you're gonna lose the house. Like straight up, that pre-qualification letter is not gonna get you what you want. You have to be pre-approved. And the other piece on this, and then I promise I will get off my soapbox, is that you need to get pre-approved before you start house hunting. You'll know exactly what you can afford. You will have the number from the lender so you know the top of your range, and you're not gonna waste time falling in love with houses that are too expensive for what you can afford. And then a good lender is gonna help you figure out what you can actually afford, not just what you qualify for, because there is a difference, right? You can probably qualify for, say, $600,000, but does that mean you can actually afford to live with $600,000 extended, especially once you factor in all those other things that we talked about, like property taxes, HOA, hidden costs, right, of home ownership. Things always sneak up. And so you oftentimes don't necessarily want to borrow all the way up to what you're pre-approved for. So a good lender can help you sort through that. Okay, so we have arrived at mistake number 7. And this is, again, the one that really ties everything else together. I call this one the DIY trap, and I am 1,000% guilty of this one myself. And I get it, right? You're smart, you've done your homework, you've watched every YouTube video out there, you've read every Reddit thread, you've been on the inner workings of Reddit, you've studied Zillow listings at 2 a.m., you've read Wikipedia articles about the Portland market, you've done your homework, and that's great, you are educated. But the reality is that online research, it can only take you so far. And there's a constant flow of people coming from major markets in the United States, right? Seattle, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Phoenix, Austin, and they're all flowing into Portland. And they're all doing their research, and they're all trying to find the best spot, 2,000 miles away. But here's where this process breaks down. Online research can't tell you about the micro trends. You're not gonna have access to the inner level data that a local realtor is gonna have. Redfin and Zillow have a lot of good data, but they don't have the property histories in the same way. They don't have the tax records. It's just not there. And Portland's a complicated space. It's a complicated market, right? There's 95 micro markets here. And you need to be able to drill down and understand street by street what's happening, because this street in Sellwood may have this sort of buying behavior or selling behavior, but 2 streets over, it might look completely different. And it's also, it's like Instagram, everything looks beautiful online, but then you get there and it doesn't look the same. And vice versa, it's also true. There are neighborhoods here that are total gems that have really good characteristics to them, but maybe they don't photograph so well. And if you don't have someone on the ground who knows that, you're gonna miss those opportunities. If you're a family and you're moving here, it gets even more complicated, right? There was a recent rezoning here of 2 of our high schools, Jefferson and Grant. And that has a lot of parents upset, and that's changing week over week, and that's gonna shift into the market. And so you need a real estate agent who understands, if you're trying to get to a particular high school, how the local community flows into that, and what are the upcoming changes from the school district that might affect that zoning, right? You might be able to find it online, but my God, you're gonna spend a lot of time digging. With the time thing, if your research then goes into, analysis paralysis, and then you delay, or then you can't figure it out, or, you just can't make a decision because you don't feel like you have all the information that you need, that's going to delay your purchase, which, as we talked about earlier, if you are delaying your purchase, home prices are appreciating, and what could have cost you less a year ago is going to cost you significantly more in a year from now. The other thing here that I am deeply and personally acquainted with, because I moved to Portland from Seattle a couple of years ago, is that relocating is not just as simple as buying a house in your neighborhood when you already live in the city. It's pretty complicated. You have to figure out the school system, you have to get your kids enrolled, you have to figure out the timing, you've got to figure out what to do with your house in another state or another city, you've got to figure out cross-country movers, right? There's a lot of moving pieces. And so you're going to need an agent who understands that experience, and also just an agent that gets you and vibes with you, right? Millennials have certain characteristics that we care about. Gen X is different. Boomers are different, right? And so finding someone that you resonate with from a personality fit who you trust is important. So the right agent in this process, they're not just opening doors for you. Like, that's part of the job, sure, but they are going to be your guide in the process. They're going to be your project manager. They're going to be your confidant, your sidekick, your therapist, right? And so think about that, because you're going to be working pretty intensely with this person. All right, so we've just covered a lot. 7 mistakes that are going to cost you time, money, and peace of mind if you're trying to relocate to the Portland area. And look, I get it. Like, this can totally feel overwhelming. I talk to people every single week who are in this position. Everybody's excited about Portland. Like, how could you not be? It's fun here, right? But it's also nerve-wracking to pick up and move. The good news is in this process is, like, you don't have to go through this process alone. If you're seriously considering moving to the greater Portland area, whether that's next month, in 6 months, or in a year from now, I would love to talk to you. I promise it's not a high pressure sales pitch. I just want to hear about, your goals, your timeline, your family, your situation, and we can talk about whether Portland is a good fit for you and your family. So you can call or text me directly anytime, 971-443-1770. That's my phone number, and I'll pick it up and I'll talk to you. I work with relocation buyers day in, day out, and I would love to connect and learn more about your situation. And if you're not quite ready to talk, that's okay too. I also have a relocation guide that maps out, neighborhoods, cost of living, schools, transportation options, things like that, which can be a helpful resource for sort of getting your bearings when you're just at the very, very early stages of the process. If you comment relocation guide below, I'll send that over real quick. So that's it. Again, if you want to have a real conversation about your specific situation, reach out to me anytime. I'm here for you. And I'm excited to talk about, your timeline, your budget, your ideal neighborhood, your ideal lifestyle, and we'll figure it out. So hope this was helpful to you, and I look forward to hearing from you.